You're not my boss. So, shut up right now. The maid's toddler fired back at the billionaire's fiancé. She was only 3 years old. She didn't know what a fiancé was, didn't know what billionaire meant, didn't understand boardrooms or bank accounts or the cold, calculated way some people look at others like their furniture. All she knew was that her mother had just been spoken to like she was nothing, in their own kitchen in the only home they had. And before anyone could stop her, before anyone even saw it coming, that little girl stood up on a chair, put her tiny hands on her hips, and said something that would change everything. Hey friend, welcome back. If you're new here, this is the place for real, raw, emotional stories. The kind that stay with you long after the video ends. Drop your flag in the comments and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. This story coming up. It's got heartbreak, it's got humor, and it's got a twist you will not see coming. Stick around. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this one ends. She never planned on raising her daughter inside a mansion she didn't own. Maria Lopez was 26 years old, and most nights she fell asleep before her head even finished hitting the pillow. She worked as a live-in housekeeper for one of the wealthiest families in the state, in a sprawling estate just outside of Greenwich, Connecticut. The kind of house with a name instead of just an address, the kind with a fountain in the front yard that cost more than Maria's entire childhood home back in Texas. She'd taken the job 2 years ago when she was pregnant and desperate and out of options, and the family had been kind enough, not warm but kind enough, to let her keep her daughter with her on the property. Her daughter's name was Sophia, 3 years old, with a head full of dark curls and a stubborn streak that made Maria laugh even on her hardest days. Sophia had grown up in the servants' quarters of that enormous house, but you'd never know it from the way she carried herself. She marched through the halls like she owned the place. She talked to the gardener like he was her best friend. She hummed songs in the kitchen while Maria cooked, completely unaware that the world saw her as just the maid's kid. Maria worked for Daniel Whitfield, 32 years old, the owner of a logistics empire his father had built and he had doubled in size. Daniel wasn't like the other wealthy men Maria had heard about from friends who worked in similar houses. He said good morning. He remembered Sophia's birthday. Once, when Sophia had a fever in the middle of the night, he was the one who drove Maria and her daughter to the emergency room himself, sitting in the waiting room until 4 a.m. even though he had a flight to catch in the morning. Maria told herself it didn't mean anything. He was just a decent man. That was all. But lately, something in the house had shifted. Daniel had gotten engaged 3 months ago, to a woman named Vanessa Cole. 23 years old, blonde, polished, the kind of beautiful that looked like it had been designed in a lab. Vanessa came from money too. Old money, the kind that looked down on new money, and looked down even further on people who clean toilets for a living. From the very first day Vanessa moved into the guest wing to settle in before the wedding, Maria felt the temperature of the house change. Started small. Vanessa would leave a mess and expect it gone within the hour. She'd ring a little silver bell when she wanted something, even though Maria was standing 2 feet away. She'd correct the way Maria folded towels, the way she organized the pantry, the way she breathed. It sometimes felt like Maria swallowed it all. She had to. A job like this, steady pay, a roof over her and Sophia's heads, health insurance for the first time in her adult life. You didn't throw that away because someone was rude to you. You kept your head down. You did your job. You went home, well, to the small room off the kitchen that was home for now. And you held your daughter and reminded yourself why you were doing all of this. For Sophia. Always for Sophia. But Sophia wasn't blind. Even at 3 years old, kids see more than adults give them credit for. She saw the way Vanessa's lips curled when she looked at her mother. She saw the way Vanessa never said please or thank you, the way some people simply don't believe those words apply to them when speaking to the help. One afternoon, Sophia sat on the kitchen floor with her crayons, drawing a picture of her mother. She was humming to herself, lost in her own little world, when Vanessa walked in wearing white linen pants and looking for her sunglasses. "Has anyone seen my?" Vanessa stopped mid-sentence, looking down at Sophia's crayons scattered across the marble floor. Oh my God! Why is this child's mess all over my kitchen? Maria, washing dishes at the sink, turned around quickly. I'm sorry, Miss Cole, I'll clean that up right now. It's fine, Vanessa said, in a tone that made it very clear it was not fine. I just don't understand why she's even allowed in here. This isn't a daycare. Maria's hands stilled in the soapy water. Something in her chest tightened, that particular kind of pain that comes from being spoken about like you're not even in the room. Like your child, your whole heart, was an inconvenience to be managed. She wiped her hands, walked over, and started gathering the crayons, murmuring an apology she didn't fully mean but had learned to say anyway. Sophia watched all of this with her big brown eyes. Quiet. Ill. Taking it in. What none of them knew yet. Not Maria, not Vanessa, not even Daniel, who was on a call upstairs and had no idea this moment was unfolding in his own kitchen, was that this small, seemingly forgettable afternoon was about to become the spark for something much bigger. Something none of them would forget. What do you think? Was Maria right to stay quiet, or should she have spoken up sooner? Let us know in the comments below. The tension in that house didn't fade after that day. Grew. Weeks passed, and Vanessa's comments became sharper, more frequent, less veiled. She started referring to Maria as the help, even when Maria was standing right there. She'd ask Daniel in front of staff things like, "Don't you think it's time we got someone more professional?" As if 2 years of loyal, careful, devoted work meant nothing. Daniel, to his credit, would usually brush it off. Maria's family, Vanessa. She stays. But Maria noticed something that worried her more than the insults themselves. Daniel was starting to look tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Tired of defending her. Tired of the friction. Engaged men, Maria had learned from watching enough lives unfold in this house, often chose peace over principle when the wedding date got close enough. Sophia, meanwhile, had taken to following her mother like a small, watchful shadow. She didn't go to daycare. There wasn't room in the budget for that on top of everything else. So she spent her days in the corners of that enormous house, playing quietly while her mother worked. She'd built her own little world in the laundry room, with a blanket fort made of folded towels and a cast of imaginary friends she talked to in a stream of non-stop 3-year-old chatter. But she was listening too. Always listening. One evening, Maria was setting the table for a dinner Daniel was hosting. Important guests, business partners flying in from Chicago. Everything had to be perfect. Vanessa had spent the entire afternoon rearranging place settings Maria had already arranged, moving a vase 3 different times, snapping at the florist over the phone about the wrong shade of white. By the time the guests arrived, Maria was exhausted, and Sophia was cranky from being shushed and tucked into corners all day. During the dinner, disaster struck in the smallest possible way, the kind of thing that, in hindsight, was nothing. Sophia, wandering near the dining room in her socks, slipped on the polished floor and bumped into a side table, knocking over a small crystal decanter. It didn't break. It just spilled a little water across the table runner. But Vanessa, standing nearby in her designer dress, reacted as if the house were on fire. "Oh my God!" she gasped, loud enough for every guest to hear. "Can someone please control this child? This is exactly why I said she shouldn't be wandering around during events." The room went quiet. Daniel's business partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. Maria rushed over, scooping Sophia up, her face burning with humiliation, murmuring apologies to the guests, to Vanessa, to the universe itself for daring to let her daughter exist in this space. "It's fine really, it's just water," Daniel said quickly, trying to smooth things over, but the damage to the mood, and to Maria's dignity, had already been done. Later that night, after the guests left and the house went quiet, Maria sat on the edge of her bed in the small room off the kitchen, Sophia already asleep beside her, and she let herself cry. Quietly, carefully, the way you cry when you can't afford to wake anyone up or let anyone see. She thought about quitting. She thought about it seriously for the first time. But where would they go? What would they do? Greenwich rent alone would eat her entire paycheck. Her family back in Texas had nothing extra to offer. She was trapped between her dignity and her daughter's stability, and there didn't seem to be a version of this story where she got to keep both. She didn't know that Sophia, lying beside her, wasn't fully asleep. Sophia had heard her mother crying before. Not often, but enough times to recognize the sound, even through a blanket of half-sleep. And something in her small chest had begun to harden into something that didn't yet have a name, but felt a lot like resolve. The next morning Vanessa would push one step too far. And this time someone very small and very fearless would be standing close enough to hear it. Have you ever had to stay quiet about something that hurt, just to protect someone you love? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. And then everything changed in a single moment. The morning started ordinarily enough. Maria was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, the radio playing low. Sophia sitting at the small side table eating cereal and swinging her feet, humming the same off-key tune she always hummed when she was happy. For a few minutes it almost felt normal, peaceful even. Then Vanessa walked in. She was already irritated. Maria could tell by the sharp click of her heels on the tile, the way her jaw was set. Wedding planning had apparently hit a snag. Later Maria would learn that the caterer Vanessa wanted had double-booked the date. But none of that was Maria's fault, and none of it was Sophia's fault either. It didn't matter. Vanessa's eyes landed on Sophia's cereal bowl, a small splash of milk on the counter beside it. "Seriously?" she snapped, the words slicing through the quiet kitchen. "Maria, can you please teach your daughter some manners? This house is a constant mess because of her." Maria froze at the stove, spatula in hand, the familiar humiliation rising in her throat. She opened her mouth to apologize, the apology that had become so automatic it barely required thought anymore. But before she could speak, a small voice cut through the kitchen. "It's just milk." Everyone turned. Sophia was still sitting at the table, but she'd stopped swinging her feet. Her small chin was lifted. Her brown eyes locked directly onto Vanessa's with a steadiness that didn't belong on a 3-year-old's face. Vanessa blinked, momentarily thrown by being addressed at all by a child she'd spent months treating as invisible, or worse, as an obstacle. "Excuse me. It's just milk," Sophia repeated, louder this time, her small hands curling into fists on the table. "You're always yelling at my mommy. She works so hard. You don't even say thank you." "Sophia," Maria said quickly, panic rising in her chest. "Honey, that's enough." But Sophia wasn't finished. Something had broken loose in her. Weeks, maybe months, of watching her mother shrink herself smaller and smaller in front of this woman, of hearing her cry quietly at night, of swallowing her own confusion and hurt because that's what good girls were supposed to do. It all came rushing out at once, the way only a child's honesty can. She climbed up onto her chair, standing now, eye level almost with Vanessa, fearless in that particular way only the very young or the very righteous can be. "You're not my boss," Sophia announced, her small voice ringing clear across the kitchen. "So, shut up right now." The room went dead silent. Vanessa's mouth fell open, a flush of red creeping up her neck. Maria nearly dropped the spatula, torn between horror and something else entirely, something that felt dangerously close to pride. And that's when the kitchen door opened, and Daniel walked in. He'd come downstairs for coffee, completely unaware of what he was walking into, and he caught the tail end of it. His fiancée standing frozen and humiliated. His housekeeper pale with panic, and a 3-year-old standing defiantly on a kitchen chair, hands on her hips, having just told the woman he was about to marry to shut up. "What," Daniel said slowly, looking between all three of them, "is going on here?" And in that single suspended moment, Maria realized something with sudden, devastating clarity. There was no version of the next 60 seconds that didn't change everything about her life, her job, and her daughter's future forever. What would you do if you were in Maria's place right now? Tell us honestly in the comments. Maria's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Daniel, she started, but Vanessa cut her off, recovering her composure with the speed of someone used to controlling every room she walked into. Your housekeeper's daughter just told me to shut up, Vanessa said, her voice trembling with indignation, one hand pressed dramatically to her chest. In your own house. This is exactly the kind of thing I've been trying to tell you about. There's no discipline here. No respect. Daniel's eyes moved from Vanessa to Sophia, still standing on the chair, chin lifted, unrepentant, to Maria, whose face had gone pale with dread. Sophia, Maria said softly, gently lifting her daughter down from the chair, kneeling to her level. We don't talk to grown-ups like that, baby. Even when we're upset. You know that. Sophia's lower lip trembled, the bravado finally cracking now that the moment had passed, tears welling up in her eyes. But she's mean to you, Mommy. All the time. You always say sorry and you didn't even do anything wrong. The kitchen went silent again, but this silence felt different. Heavier. Because Sophia hadn't just defended herself. She'd said in her small, unfiltered 3-year-old way, exactly what Maria had been too afraid to say for 2 years. Daniel's expression shifted. Something in his face, that practiced calm he wore like armor in business meetings, slipped just for a second, and underneath it was something Maria had never seen directed at her before. Real, focused attention. Is that true? He asked, looking directly at Maria now. Has Vanessa been treating you badly? Maria's instinct was to deflect, to smooth it over, to protect her job the way she'd protected it for 2 years. It's nothing, Mr. Whitfield, really. We just had a misunderstanding. Maria. His voice was quiet but firm. Please. The truth. And something in the way he asked it, not as her employer but as a person who genuinely wanted to know, broke something loose in Maria, the same dam that had broken in her daughter minutes earlier. She's never said thank you, Maria said quietly, her voice shaking. Not once in 3 months. She rings a bell for me like I'm not a person. She criticizes everything I do in front of guests. And last week she told me Sophia shouldn't be wandering around the house she's lived in her entire life. Maria's eyes filled, but she kept going, the words pouring out now that the floodgates had opened. I've stayed quiet because I need this job. Because I have nowhere else to go. But my daughter shouldn't have had to be the one brave enough to say something. Vanessa's face had gone from red to white. Daniel, this is absurd. She's clearly exaggerating to save her job. Vanessa. Daniel's voice cut through hers, sharper than Maria had ever heard it. I asked her a direct question. Let her answer it. For the first time in 3 months, the power in that kitchen had shifted, and everyone in the room could feel it. Daniel turned to Sophia, crouching down to her level. His voice gentle now. Hey, kiddo. I'm sorry you had to feel like you needed to say that. But you're right about one thing. Nobody should talk to your mommy like that. Including me, if I ever let it happen without saying anything. Sophia sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand, and gave him a small, uncertain nod. Then Daniel stood, turned to Vanessa, and said the words that would define everything that came next. We need to talk. Privately. Have you ever had to make a choice this hard, between protecting yourself and standing up for what's right? Share your story below. The conversation between Daniel and Vanessa lasted nearly 2 hours, behind the closed doors of his study, and Maria spent every minute of it certain she was about to lose her job. She packed a small bag just in case. She held Sophia close on her lap in their little room off the kitchen, rocking her gently, telling her over and over that she wasn't in trouble, that she'd done nothing wrong, even as Maria's own mind spun with worry about what would happen to them next. When the study door finally opened, it was Daniel who walked into the kitchen, alone. Vanessa was nowhere in sight. Maria stood quickly, bracing herself. She's leaving, Daniel said simply. Not just the house. The engagement is off. Maria's mouth fell open. Mr. Whitfield, I never meant for any of this. I know, he said, and for the first time, she saw something almost relieved in his expression, like a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had finally been set down. Maria, I've known for months that something wasn't right. I think I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant facing a lot of things I wasn't ready to face. It took your daughter standing on a kitchen chair to make me actually look at what was happening in my own house. He crouched down to where Sophia was peeking out from behind her mother's legs, still a little shy after the morning's chaos. You're a pretty brave kid, you know that, he said, smiling for the first time that day. Bravest person in this house, actually. Sophia, ever resilient, broke into a grin, the kind only small children can offer after a storm. Total and immediate. I know, she said, and Daniel laughed, a real laugh, the tension of the morning finally breaking. In the weeks that followed, the house changed in ways Maria hadn't expected. Daniel began joining them for dinner some evenings, not as her employer but simply as someone who, for the first time, seemed to actually see her. Not as the help, but as a woman who had carried more weight alone than anyone in that enormous house ever fully understood. It didn't happen all at once, and Maria was careful, cautious with her heart in a way 2 years of swallowed dignity had taught her to be. But slowly, over months, something real began to grow between them, built not on the foundation Vanessa and Daniel's relationship had stood on, but on something steadier. Respect, honesty, and a little girl who'd had the courage to say what the adults around her had been too afraid to say. A year later, Maria stood in that same kitchen, in a simple white dress, marrying a man who had learned, because of a 3-year-old's fearless honesty, what it truly meant to see the people in his own home. Sophia, now 4, stood beside them in a tiny matching dress, beaming, utterly convinced that the whole thing had been her idea. Looking back, Maria realized the lesson in all of it wasn't really about wealth or status, or who held power in that house. It was simpler than that. Dignity isn't something you're given by people who decide you deserve it. Sometimes, it's something the smallest, bravest voice in the room reminds you that you already had all along. To everyone watching who has ever felt small, overlooked, or talked down to, I hope this story reminded you of something important. Your worth was never up for debate. Thank you for spending this time with us and walking through Maria and Sophia's story today. Stories like theirs are why we do this. If this story touched your heart even a little, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely means the world to us and helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Make sure you're subscribed because we share real, emotional stories just like this one every single week. Stories that will make you feel, make you think, and remind you to believe in people again. What part of Sophia's story hit you hardest? We read every single comment, so tell us down below. And if you know someone who could use a reminder of their own worth today, do them a favor and send this video their way. Thank you for being here with us. We'll see you in the next story.